Let's first take a look at 9-7-5. So under the gun +1 raises, big blind calls, flop comes 9-7-5, big blind checks, under the gun +1 checks behind. When this happens, you're going to see that while previously these, the distribution of ranges on the turn was often kind of close, but now you're going to find that there are some cards that are particularly great for the out of position player and some cards that are particularly bad for the out of position player. Here, it makes logical sense that when it goes check check on 9-7-5, that under the gun +1 is going to have a lot of unpaired high cards, right? So it turns out the high cards, especially the ace, are very, very bad for the big blind. Makes sense, right? So if you get a bad card like an ace, you're going to be checking a ton. But if you get a good card like any lower card, now you're going to be betting very frequently, right? If we go back to the flow chart here, if we get an ace, it would be this scenario. Well, I'm sorry, it'd be, what board are we on? This scenario, bad card would be rarely overbetting, right? Or rarely betting large. If we get a good card though, like say a 6 on 9-7-5, we're going to be betting very frequently using mostly a small size. Okay? So if we got a bad card, we'd be betting rarely. If we got a good card, we'd be betting frequently. And that makes sense, right? Because on a bad card, like these high cards, we don't have the range advantage. But on a good card, like, well, most of these low cards, we do have the range advantage. Notice there are some cards in the middle too, like a 5, 7, 9, 10. In that scenario, you probably just want to do a decent amount of checking as well. Let's look at the sizes we use when we are betting. Notice on the high cards, we actually just like basically never bet, right? On the lower cards, we are using a mix of sizes, as the flowchart essentially says, right? Often using a smaller size. Let's see if that holds true. Like you see a 6. This is a really good card. You're betting that very frequently using a small size. Same thing as an 8. An 8 is a very good card. These are the two cards that were quite good. Notice 4 and 3 are quite good as well. In those scenarios, we're using a mix of sizes, mostly small as well. Okay? So cool stuff, right? It's interesting to think that if the turn's a 2 here, you should be betting, what is this, 73% of the time. On a 3, you should be betting 83% of the time, right? 83% of the time is a lot. I think a lot of people don't actually bet nearly that often in these scenarios, and that results in it just going check, 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 check. And that what happens is you let the player under the gun +1 just check down with stuff like ace high, and they realize their equity very well. By betting, you put them in a nasty spot. All right, let's take a look at on a turn 6. Under the gun +1 raises, you call the big blind, flop comes, 9-7-5, it goes check, check, turns a 6. This is an excellent card for the big blind, so you're going to want to be betting frequently and small. Now, let's go through and look at the range that it makes logical sense to bet. And the range it makes logical sense to bet are all of your best hands and a lot of your draws, because you're going to have a lot of quote-unquote best hands. The best hands in this scenario are pretty much going to be any 9 and better. And you may say, can I really bet a 9? If I bet a 9 and get raised, it's pretty bad, right? And yeah, it would be. But that's okay, because look how protected your range is. You have all of these nut hands, right? All these 8s are straights. That's a lot of straights. All these other hands in this region are like 2 pairs, which is also quite good. So your betting range in terms of your made hands is very, very strong. Also, when it does go check, check on the flop, a 9 is very often the best hand anyway. So you're in very good shape here. And you know under the gun +1's range doesn't really have a whole lot of 8s in it to begin with. So you're in great shape in this spot. Notice here we have 41% premium made hands. That's going to allow us to have up to 40-ish% bluffs. So as you see, I'm just taking like literally every bluff I can find. All these overcards I'm bluffing because notice the opponent's going to have a whole lot of ace highs. By betting these hands, we get ace highs to fold. I'm betting all the 4s. 4s all have a gut shot. It's not a good one, but it's a gut shot. Then I'm betting some of these hands down here, just like effectively considering them draws, like 5-3, bottom pair with a, 2-pair draw, and a gut shot, I suppose. And then also I'm betting these hands here, which are all either, well, mostly flush draws, right? All these hands here are flush draws. We are still checking some hands, like these hands that can conceivably win at showdown. Maybe ace, I guess ace 10's a draw very clearly because it has a gut shot, right? I was going to say if we could check like ace 10, that may make sense. But like if you check ace jack, it could win at the showdown. If you check king queen, it probably loses. It's fine to have some checks and then folds in your range. If we do check a hand like 3s or 2s, we're planning on folding those too. Betting these could be fine. But anyway, the hands we're going to be checking are the marginal made hands. That's going to be mainly 7s, 5s, and 6s. So as you see, we just have a big pile of 7s, 5s, and 6s here, right? Makes logical sense. Okay, go through, categorize the range. It looks like this. Notice we have a lot of hands that can bet, relatively few hands that can check. I'm checking about 30% of the time. Solver recommends checking about 30% of the time, so good. What is the solver? Well, solver's betting all sorts of stuff. I'm going to say, what is the solver checking? Let's go through and see what it's mostly checking. It's mostly checking 5s, mostly checking 6s, mostly checking 7s, right? Still is betting some 5s and 6s and 7s. It's using a mixed strategy here. Notice that 3s and 2s do opt to bet a lot of the time, like I said. I think that's probably fine to bet those. Notice all the 9s are betting, right? Or most of the 9s are betting. Notice ace-jack even bets here, which I was opting to check. Kind of interesting to see king-queen and king-queen and king-queen, king-jack, and queen-jack checking. I'm kind of surprised those are not betting. Not really sure why solver would bet ace-high, but not these. Because when you bet these, you get people to fold. But, you know, again, solver starts to do sort of interesting, convoluted things. Always try to use logic to figure out why the solver is doing what it's doing, but at the same time realize that sometimes the answer is, we don't know. So anyway, neat spot. What I want to show you here is that on this turn, though, you're betting a ton, 70% of the time. When you're betting 70% of the time, you're just printing money by betting, and if you're not betting, you are lighting your money on fire. You got to be bluffing here a lot. Notice like all of this stuff's betting, right? Also notice most of the straights are betting too. Not all the straights, but the vast majority of the straights. What about on a 7? A 7, if you think back, is not actually that great of a turn, but it's still like okay because Big Blind does have a lot of 7s in their range. The problem is that under the gun +1 would often check back with some 7s that they have, but they just don't have very many 7s, right? So now you want to be betting in this scenario with your 7s and your 9s. You may say again, but can't our 9s be behind? Sure, they can, but at the same time, they're very often the best hand. Also, you want to be betting with your draws. And I actually screwed this up a little bit, didn't I? Turns out these hands are draws right here. These 8s are draws. My bad. So we have a few extra draws here that I had labeled as premium. I think it's probably okay. Maybe you should bet slightly less often in this scenario. It's probably reasonable. Because then notice we would have a few too many bluffs. We'd have, what is this, 12 additional bluffs. So, you know, it's not like a gigantic portion, but it's still a bit of an oversight by me. I apologize. How could we compensate? We could compensate by perhaps not betting some of these like ace-high flush draws. That would make logical sense, right? We could compensate by not betting all of the bottom pair type hands. That would make sense. So sure, that all seems reasonable. Let's take a look and see what the solver does. Now, as you see, very interesting strategy here. Solver is betting the vast majority of the 7s. Solver's betting the vast majority of the 9s. One thing worth noting, this big bet size, right? So previously, solver was using a small bet size on 9, 7, 5, 6 because it has a big equity advantage. Now we lack the equity advantage, so we're going to be betting more polarized, and when we're betting more polarized, we're using a bigger size. You can still bet the 9s using a bigger size. Because when it does go check-check, these hands are still likely best, even though under the gun +1 does have some 7s. They're not going to have a ton of them. They're going to have some, but not a ton. So all of these draws over here bet, which I did, so that's nice. I was betting 4-3 here. Looks like solver's not actually betting 4-3 when it has it, so interesting to see. The majority of the 8s are betting, majority of the 6s are betting. So all this makes pretty much logical sense, right? Solver does check a little bit more often than I do, I think. Yeah, it's roughly the same. So anyway, pretty neat spot where on 9-7-5, remember if we go back to the flow chart, 9-7-5, when we get a bad turn, we rarely bet, betting large. Like say the turn here was an ace or a king, we're like almost never betting. But on a good turn, we're going to be betting often using a small size. And then when we catch that like medium type turn, remember the 7 was medium. On a medium type turn, we're going to be betting somewhere between those two scenarios. And that's usually going to be somewhat frequently, but again, using a very polarized betting size. Because when we're betting, we either have a really good made hand or we have a draw that lacks showdown value.